Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on the 2024 election. We're going beyond the headlines today, dissecting an opinion piece with some pretty interesting numbers.
Yeah, we often get caught up in the national polls, the big picture, but it's those smaller subgroups that can really hold the key to victory.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This piece is talking about a Trump number.
Right.
What does that mean?
It's the theory that former President Trump has a consistent base
Okay.
of about 48% of the popular vote. You can almost think of it as his political gravity,
Mhm.
so strong it seems unaffected by any campaign events.
So no matter what happens, there's no chance of swaying those voters. I mean, that seems almost impossible.
It's not quite that simple. We are talking about an average over time.
Right.
There's always room for slight shifts and variations.
Sure.
But the core idea is that his persona just resonates so deeply with a large portion of the electorate.
Yeah.
That makes him very loyal.
But wait, the piece also mentions a potential hidden Trump vote
Exactly.
lurking in some traditionally red states like Texas and Florida.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
This is where things get interesting.
Okay.
Some analysts are pointing to polling data
Yeah.
in those states that show Trump's support slightly lower than his actual performance in previous elections. So it's like a discrepancy that raises a big question mark. Are voters intentionally underreporting their support, or is there some type of softening in those areas?
Ooh. So, like, potential crack in the armor.
Yeah.
That could have major implications.
Absolutely. If there's a significant hidden vote that materializes on election day,
Right.
it could reshape the electoral map in a way that the polls aren't capturing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if it's a sign of weakness, that opens up opportunities for his opponent.
Okay, so we've got the Trump number and this mystery of the hidden vote.
Yeah.
What other voter groups are really important in this election?
Well, the piece dives into something you might not expect: a surge in support for Trump among minority voters,
Really?
particularly Hispanic and African American voters.
Oh, hold on. That's not what you typically hear.
Right.
Are the numbers really that significant?
They are, yeah. According to some recent polling data, Trump's support among Hispanic voters is hovering above 40%, and he's pulling nearly 30% of the black vote.
Wow.
These are substantial increases compared to 2020.
I am genuinely surprised by those figures. What kind of impact could that have, especially in those key battleground states?
It could be huge, a game changer.
Okay.
Think about states like Arizona and Nevada,
Right.
where the Hispanic vote is so important.
Yeah.
And for black voters, states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia could be significantly affected.
Wow.
If those trends hold, it could really reshape the electoral map.
This is where I get fascinated by the so what of all this data. Why are we seeing this shift in support among minority voters? What's driving it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it a response to specific policy positions, economic concerns, cultural shifts?
Yeah.
Or maybe a combination of factors?
Right.
There's no easy answer, and it deserves more exploration, but it's clear that traditional assumptions about how these demographics vote might need to be reevaluated.
So we've got a solid base, a potential hidden vote, and a surprising surge in minority support. What about the rural vote, that was so crucial to Trump's victories in the past?
The piece points to a strategic move by Vice President Harris to address this very challenge. The choice of Tim Walz as her running mate
Right.
was directly aimed at appealing to those rural voters.
So is the goal to actually win the rural vote, or is it more about damage control, trying to minimize losses?
It's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
While winning outright in heavily rural areas might be a stretch,
Right.
even a small shift
Yeah.
in voter sentiment could make a big difference in a close race. The strategy seems to be about chipping away at Trump's dominance in those communities. Makes sense, but can Walz really pull it off? His performance in the vice presidential debate, wasn't exactly inspiring.
That's a valid point. First impressions matter, and that debate performance might have left some voters with a less than favorable view of him.
Yeah.
However, it's still early,
Okay.
and there's time to recover.
All right, so we've got the Trump number, a potential hidden vote, shifting demographics, and a VP pick strategically chosen to appeal to rural voters. What else is this piece highlighting?
Well, there's another fascinating group we haven't discussed yet, the non-Magia Republicans. Think of them as the quarter to a third of GOP voters who aren't fully aligned with the Magia movement.
Okay, break that down for me. Who are these voters and why are they significant?
They're a bit of a wild card.
Okay.
They were initially resistant to Trump during the primaries,
Hmm.
and many of them indicated they wouldn't vote for him in the general.
So they're the potential swing vote within the Republican Party itself. If Trump can win their support, he's in a great position. But if they defect, it could spell trouble for him.
That's exactly right. The piece cites some early signs of weakness in their opposition to Trump, but also points to some concerning defections in recent polling, especially in the Arizona Senate race.
It sounds like this group is really struggling with their choices. Do they stick with the Republican Party, even if they have reservations about Trump, or do they risk splitting the vote and helping the Democrats?
It's a tough decision,
Yeah.
and the outcome could have a major impact on the election. These voters represent a large chunk of the electorate, and their choices could be the deciding factor in a lot of states.
So we're looking at a complex interplay of loyalties, strategies, and shifting demographics. This is getting really interesting.
It absolutely is, and it highlights why we need to go beyond the surface-level analysis and really delve into the nuances of the electorate.
I'm starting to see that the real story of this election isn't just about the candidates, it's about the voters. It's about understanding their motivations, their concerns, and the things that are influencing their decisions.
Exactly. It's about understanding the people who will ultimately decide the fate of this nation. And it's important to remember that these voter groups aren't monolithic blocks. There's a lot of diversity within each group.
Right. It's not as simple as saying all rural voters think this way or all Hispanic voters lean that way.
Exactly. Take the non-Magi Republicans, for instance.
Yeah.
While some might be hesitant about Trump, they might also be drawn to certain Republican policy positions,
Right.
particularly on issues like the economy or foreign policy.
Hmm.
So it's a complex calculation.
So it's a balancing act for both campaigns.
Yeah,
They need to energize their base, but also appeal to those swing voters
exactly.
within those different groups.
Precisely. And that's why we see campaigns tailoring their messages so carefully, trying to hit those pressure points that resonate with specific segments of the electorate.
We were talking earlier about Vice President Harris's strategy of targeting the rural vote with her running mate Tim Walz. What's the thinking behind his approach?
It seems to be a blend of policy and personal connection.
Okay.
On the policy front, he's emphasizing issues that resonate with rural communities,
Like what?
such as agriculture, infrastructure, and access to healthcare.
Hmm.
But beyond the talking points, he's also trying to build rapport,
Okay.
trying to show that he understands their concerns and respects their way of life.
So it's not just about promises, it's about showing up
Right.
and demonstrating that understanding.
Exactly. Authenticity is crucial. Rural voters are discerning. They can tell when someone is just paying lip service versus genuinely connecting with their concerns.
It makes me think about the dynamics within those specific communities. Are there local leaders, influencers, or organizations that play a role in shaping voter opinions?
That's a great point. We often focus on the national figures,
Right.
but those local voices can be incredibly influential.
Yeah.
Think about faith leaders, community organizers, or even just respected figures within a small town.
Sure.
Their endorsements and perspectives can carry a lot of weight.
It's like a ripple effect where those local conversations and connections can influence the broader political landscape.
Precisely. And it highlights the importance of understanding the social fabric of these communities,
Yeah.
the networks of trust and influence that shape how people view the candidates and the issues.
This all makes me wonder, are there any historical parallels or precedents that might shed light on how these different voter groups might behave in this election?
That's an interesting question. Political scientists and historians often look to past elections for clues, trying to identify patterns or trends that might repeat themselves. But of course, every election is unique, with its own set of circumstances and personalities.
Right, we can't just assume that history will repeat itself perfectly. But maybe there are some insights we can glean from past campaigns that targeted similar demographics or faced comparable challenges.
Absolutely. For example, we could look at previous elections where a candidate successfully flipped a traditionally red state
Okay.
by appealing to minority voters or making inroads in rural areas. Or we could study campaigns that effectively mobilized young voters
Wait.
or swayed undecided voters in the final weeks leading up to Election Day.
It's like using history as a guide, not a blueprint,
Right.
to help us navigate the complexities of the present.
That's a great way to put it. We can learn from the past, but we also need to be open to the possibility of surprises and unexpected outcomes.
Speaking of surprises, one of the things that struck me about the piece was the focus on those smaller subgroups within the electorate. We often hear about the Hispanic vote or the rural vote as if they're these monolithic blocks. But the reality is far more nuanced, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that these groups are incredibly diverse, with a wide range of perspectives, priorities, and motivations.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as assuming that all members of a particular demographic will vote the same way.
So what are some of the factors that contribute to this diversity within these groups?
Well, there's age, for instance. A young Hispanic voter might have very different views than an older Hispanic voter, influenced by their life experiences, cultural influences, and the issues that matter to them.
Right, and it's not just age. There's also socioeconomic status, education level, religious beliefs, regional differences,
Right.
a whole constellation of factors
Yeah.
that shape individual perspectives.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important for campaigns to understand these nuances, to tailor their messages and outreach efforts to resonate with the specific needs and aspirations of different segments within these groups.
It's like a mosaic, where each individual piece contributes to the overall picture, but each piece also has its own unique color and texture.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it highlights the complexity of the electorate, the challenge of trying to understand and predict how these diverse groups will ultimately make their decisions.
So as we delve deeper into this mosaic, what are some of the key trends or patterns that we're seeing emerge within these specific voter groups?
Well, one interesting trend is the growing influence of young voters,
Okay.
particularly those from Generation Z and the millennial generation. They're digital natives, they're more diverse than any previous generation,
Right.
and they're deeply concerned about issues like climate change, social justice, and economic inequality.
And their
Eh,
turnout in recent elections has been steadily increasing.
Exactly. And that's why both campaigns are working hard to court their vote,
Right.
recognizing that they have the potential to be a decisive force in this election.
So what are they doing specifically to appeal to young voters?
Well, they're using social media platforms to engage with them.
Okay.
They're tailoring their messages to address the issues that young people care about. And they're trying to connect with them on a personal level,
Right.
recognizing that authenticity and relatability are key to winning their trust.
It's interesting to think about the generational divide in politics.
Hmm.
Do young voters view the political landscape differently than older generations?
Absolutely. They've grown up in a different world,
Sure.
shaped by different events and cultural influences. They're more likely to be skeptical of traditional institutions, more attuned to social justice issues, and more comfortable with diversity and change.
So are they more likely to support a particular candidate or party?
Well, it's not a simple answer. They're not a monolithic group, and their political views are quite diverse. But generally speaking, they tend to be more progressive than older generations, and they're more likely to support candidates who align with their values on issues like climate change and social justice.
So does that mean they're automatically in the Harris camp?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
While they might agree with her on some issues, they might also be disillusioned with the current political system and feel like neither candidate truly represents their interests.
It seems like young voters are a bit of a wild card,
Yeah.
just like the non-Magi Republicans.
They are. They're a force to be reckoned with, and their decisions could have a major impact on the outcome of this election.
It's fascinating to see how these different voter groups are navigating this complex political landscape, each with their own set of priorities and motivations.
It really is. And it highlights why we need to go beyond the surface level analysis and really delve into the nuances of the electorate.
As we continue this exploration, I'm curious about the role of information and media in shaping voter opinions. We're bombarded with news, social media updates, and campaign ads from all sides. How do voters sift through all that noise and make informed decisions?
That's a crucial question. We live in an age of information overload,
Right.
and it can be incredibly challenging to distinguish fact from fiction, bias from objectivity.
Right. It's not just about the quantity of information, it's about the quality
Exactly.
and the sources.
Voters need to be critical consumers of information, to evaluate the credibility of their sources, to consider different perspectives, and to be wary of misinformation and propaganda.
So how can voters develop those critical thinking skills? What are some red flags to watch out for?
One red flag is emotionally charged language or imagery that's designed to provoke a strong reaction rather than present a balanced perspective.
Hmm.
Another is the use of logical fallacies or misleading statistics to support a particular claim.
It's like a detective game, where voters need to become savvy investigators, scrutinizing the evidence and questioning the motives of those presenting it.
That's a great analogy. And it's important to remember that misinformation can come from all sides of the political spectrum.
So it's not about blindly trusting sources that align with our own biases.
Right.
It's about critically evaluating information from all sources.
Precisely. And it's about seeking out diverse perspectives, engaging in respectful dialogue with people who hold different views, and being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
It sounds like being an informed voter requires a lot of effort and discernment.
It does. But it's also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
When we engage in this process thoughtfully, we empower ourselves to make informed decisions that reflect our values and contribute to a healthier democracy.
Speaking of informed decisions, how much do you think voters' choices are influenced by their personal experiences versus broader policy debates?
That's a fascinating question. I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
People are naturally drawn to candidates who they feel understand their struggles, their aspirations, and their values.
Right.
But they also care about policies that will impact their lives, their communities, and the future of the country.
So it's not just about feeling a connection with a candidate. It's also about believing that they have the right ideas
Right.
and the competence to implement them.
Absolutely. Voters are looking for both heart and mind, both empathy and expertise.
This makes me think about the role of personal narratives in campaigns. We often hear candidates sharing their own stories, their struggles, their triumphs. How effective is that in connecting with voters?
Personal narratives can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
They can humanize a candidate, make them relatable, and help voters connect with them on an emotional level.
Right.
But it's important that these narratives are authentic and genuine, not just crafted talking points.
Right. Voters can usually sense when someone is being sincere versus putting on a show.
Exactly. And it's not just about sharing personal stories.
Yeah.
It's about demonstrating empathy and understanding for the experiences of others.
So it's about connecting those personal narratives to the broader concerns and aspirations of the electorate.
Precisely. It's about showing that you understand where people are coming from, that you share their values, and that you have a vision for a future that includes them.
This makes me wonder, how much do you think voters are influenced by the perceived character or temperament of a candidate?
I think it's a significant factor,
Okay.
especially in today's polarized political climate. Voters are looking for leaders who they believe are honest, trustworthy, and capable of handling pressure and making tough decisions.
So it's not just about policy positions, it's about having the right qualities to lead.
Exactly. Voters want to know that the person they elect has the judgment, the temperament, and the integrity to guide the nation through challenging times.
This all makes me think about the concept of leadership itself.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a good leader in today's complex and rapidly changing world?
That's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Right.
But I think some of the core qualities remain constant. Vision, integrity, empathy, resilience, and the ability to inspire and unite people around a common purpose.
So it's not just about having the right policies, it's about having the right qualities to lead effectively
Yes,
and to bring people together.
precisely. And that's what voters are ultimately looking for when they cast their ballots, someone they believe has the character, the competence, and the vision to lead the nation forward.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the Trump number to the hidden vote, the shifting demographics, and the rise of new political forces. It's been incredible exploring this tapestry of the electorate.
It really has, and it highlights why we need to go beyond, those generalizations about red states and blue states or conservative voters and liberal voters.
Right.
The reality is so much more nuanced and fascinating.
Absolutely. We've seen how those personal experiences, those local influences, and even those individual values can shape how people vote.
Yeah.
It's not just about party affiliation or demographic categories. It's about understanding the human stories
Exactly.
behind those numbers.
And that's what makes this election so interesting. It's a reflection of who we are as a nation.
Yeah.
Our hopes, our fears, our divisions, and our aspirations.
So as we head into the final stretch of this election, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be paying attention to?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay engaged. Don't get overwhelmed by all the noise and the negativity.
Right.
Remember that your vote matters.
It's easy to feel like our individual votes don't matter,
Yeah.
When we look at those specific voter groups, like we've been talking about, we can see how even a small shift can have a huge impact.
Exactly. Think about those non-MAGA Republicans or those younger voters.
Right.
Their decisions could be the deciding factor.
It's a good reminder that elections aren't just about the candidates, they're about all of us. We have the power to shape the direction of the country.
I agree. It's a responsibility we need to take seriously.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the 2024 election.
It has.
Thanks for joining us. We hope this conversation has sparked some new insights and maybe inspired you to be more informed and engaged in our democracy.
It's been a pleasure.
To everyone listening, stay curious, stay engaged, and until next time, keep diving deep.